happily disagree. That's what we like on
Absolutely.
Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you.
GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pearce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, you're with GB News. In a moment, headliners, but first let's bring you the latest news headlines. And the Bank of England has raised its base rate from 3.5% to 4% today. It's the 10th increase in a row, but inflation is beginning to fall. The bank also said the UK is set to enter recession this year, but stresses economic downturns should be shorter and less severe than previously expected. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, today supported the Bank of England's decision.
We recognise it is very difficult for families, businesses up and down the country when interest rates go up, but much harder for them would be if we didn't take decisive steps to bring down inflation, and that's why the Bank of England is absolutely right to do what they've done today, and we in the government must make sure we support them by what I do in the budget to make sure that we make it easier, not harder, for them to do what we all want to do, which is to halve inflation.
The Business Secretary is urging energy companies to suspend what they're calling the outrageous practice of forcibly installing prepayment energy meters. Earlier, Ofgem announced it was launching an urgent investigation into British Gas after reports that contractors working for them had been unreasonably forcing the prepayment meters on vulnerable customers. The boss of British Gas owner Centrica says he's horrified. Energy and Climate Minister Graham Stewart has said it's appalling.
I brought in all the suppliers last week to talk about how we better look after vulnerable people, because there are clear rules and they have obviously not been followed, and therefore I need the regulator and I need the companies to do the right thing by people who are in the most difficult of circumstances and have been treated on this evidence appallingly.
Lancashire Police say they've now located and have been speaking to a potential new witness they were looking for in the search for Nicola Bulley. Earlier today, they'd released an image of a woman they wanted to speak to who was seen in the area where the mother of two disappeared. The 45-year-old went missing last Friday in Michaels-on-the-Wyre while walking her dog. As part of the hunt, divers are still searching the River Wyre. Rail passengers will face some travel disruption tomorrow as fresh strikes by train drivers cause travel problems all over the country. The RMT and ASLEF union members are walking out in a long-running dispute over pay, jobs and conditions. Rail operators are warning of disruption to services all day and little to no services in some parts of the country. And finally, the Princess of Wales has been filming a video to promote her campaign for positivity in early life with radio and television personality Roman Kemp. Wrapping up against the cold in a sheepskin coat and gloves, Kate chats to Kemp in footage taken in Hertfordshire last month. It's all part of the Princess's Shaping Up campaign, aimed at raising the importance of early years development in children. The film is due to be released tomorrow. That's it. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News. Time now for Headliners.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Welcome to Headliners. Next to me, we have a talented performer and passionate lover of dogs. That's Josh Howie, and the big dog himself, that's Nick Dixon. So that should be a bit of a love-in tonight. First, let's look at Friday's front pages before these two get it on. Daily Mail. We start with people simply don't vanish into thin air, except they appear to have done just that. The Telegraph. Lockdown damage to workforce is permanent. And rumours about who exactly Prince Harry lost his virginity to as well, bizarrely. Guardian have calls for tougher windfall tax after Shell posts what they describe as obscene record profits. The Mirror have the story of the footballer Greenwood charges, Mason Greenwood charges dropped by his girlfriend. The Times, British Gas banned from force-fitting new meters. And a photograph there of the gentleman who is apparently in charge of the firm that profit from breaking into people's homes and cutting off their supply. Very evil indeed. The Express don't jump for joy just yet, but slump to end of next year. There's Rishi Sunak looking quite happy about that. Metro, power crazy. That's the final story on the front pages. We will now take a look at them in some more detail. So, Josh, you will kick us off with The Guardian.
So, yeah, the main story they're going with, and a few other papers, which is calls for tougher windfall tax after Shell posts obscene record profits. They have made profits of nearly £40 billion this year. Now, it's really hard to sort of visualise what 40... I mean, just to give you an idea of it, it's more than all three of our salaries combined.
Right, so probably more than all huge... GB News presenters combined.
Really?
But this is, this is worldwide, though, to be fair. This is not
This is
British...
worldwide. They make about $2 billion from the UK.
OK.
But still, when you have the Shell's new chief executive, he's saying... These are incredibly difficult times, not for them or its shareholders, as to be said. And the answer to that is to continue to make sure that we provide energy to the world and make loads of money. He didn't say the
There was a quote, he said that these companies, we're experiencing difficulties as well, because we're a sort of company that has to invest 10 or 15, 20 years into the future.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like...
We're all suffering.
We're all But also, there's a little threat here. He says, so like, you know, he had to make sure that the lights are on, which otherwise would have gone off, i.e., we made loads of money, but if it wasn't for us, you would all been like...
The alternative is, it's not necessarily... I mean, you know, there is a tendency to suspect that it's that they are war profiteering, essentially, that Putin invades Ukraine and that they have reaped all the benefits. It's a bit more complicated than that, to be fair, I think, is it? I don't know, what do you think?
I don't know if it's that much more complicated. I mean, that's certainly one thing that's led to the increase, isn't it? So that's why it gives me pause, because normally I'm against all tax, really. But if it's the result of a war, which is just another form of governments messing about, then maybe we should do this to offset it. The only thing that gives me pause is that I find myself agreeing with Ed Miliband and Ed Davey, which is a rule of thumb, and I don't know much about a topic. I think just do the opposite or whatever they say. So I'm not sure, Simon, anymore.
Ed Miliband's one of his sort of landmark proposals was about capping the profit of energy companies a few years ago, and it seemed crazy then, didn't it?
Does Ed Miliband have landmark proposals?
Is that the word I want? I don't know. It was one of those ones he had etched into his tombstone.
One of his little ideas.
In his courtyard garden.
In April, everybody's energy bills are going to go up 40%. And now that's even though costs have gone considerably down since then. But yes, two of the things that they were talking about, which do make sense, are one is to cut these the tax breaks that they get for investing in new oil and gas fields. Like, they're going to make the profits down the end of that. So the idea that we're in some inadvertent way paying for that, and also to backdate some of those profits, the taxes, to 2022, which is when these ridiculous profits started to really come hit.
It does seem like they need to update the mechanisms by which they tax multinationals of this kind, because it's quite easy for them to move their profits around, isn't it? They have means and ways of saying, oh, well, we have to pay for the intellectual property right of the Shell logo, you know, and that happens to be based in the Cayman Islands or something, and woof, all it goes, you know, and you're left with a couple of $100 grand.
134 million for last year tax.
Not enough.
Out of 40 billion, I mean, come on.
That barely is all the GB News presenters put together. Do you want to mention the picture on the front page there, or is that of no...
Well, I mean, yeah, that's Zelensky's hanging out with the European Commissioner Chief. I don't know what he's doing. Has he made her a quilt or a blanket?
He's signed her a Ukraine flag.
Oh,
so
that's so sweet. But essentially the story is that, they ain't joining the EU. At least not in any realistic time.
Not in any sort of sense that they're going to bring the war into it. And the Afghan refugees told to quit London.
Yeah, I mean, the way that the Afghani refugees have been treated, I think, is disgusting. These are people who helped us and has lives...
But they're not being kicked out. They're leaving London for Wetherby. That sounds quite nice.
Yeah, but they've been here for last year. They've set up their homes. Their children are now attending schools, doing exams and whatnot.
Yeah.
Look, they're staying in a 4-star hotel in Kensington.
It's not
That's not so bad. But we got here a former Afghani general. We've got, translators. These are people whose lives were put at risk, who have helped the UK.
Yeah.
And now to be sort of sent off, and they're going to be an hour from the town centre up in Leeds, and it's going to be, some of them already have jobs. So this isn't ideal.
They're going to be near Leeds, Simon. That's how bad it is.
Near Leeds.
I mean, The Guardian does make it sound like that.
Keep them in a 4-star hotel in Kensington indefinitely. Perhaps things should have been done more immediately. Perhaps Wetherby should have been the first port of call. Nick, you've got the Mirror.
Yes, this is Greenwood, charges dropped. So Mason Greenwood, massive story, and all charges have been dropped against him, and so he's just saying he's relieved, and it's all pretty non-committal so far. The club is saying it will conduct its own process before determining next steps. That's Man United, of course. He was one of Man United's most talented strikers. He could score goals with 2 feet, so he's like the future of Man United, but then he had this charge brought against him. There was this very disturbing audio going around. I don't believe it was ever confirmed that was definitely him on the audio. And now the charge has been dropped. But, of course, in the way the world is, Nike have already terminated his deal. EA terminated his deal, took him out of FIFA. So just because the charge has been dropped, can he come back to the game is a big question.
I mean, I don't know if there's precedent for this, but would sponsors be able to put pressure on United itself?
Well, I don't know. I mean, United are so...
not pick him,
United are so massive themselves, I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, I suppose that's the point. They can drop the individual sponsorship deals. He's obviously going to be hit by that, but not as hard as he would be if they said, listen, if you want to carry on carrying our name on your shirts, that's the point, isn't it?
It's a very tricky story. Gary Neville's already got in trouble for retweeting the former head of the CPS and basically saying that he's innocent, and then lots of people have sort of attacked Gary Neville.
Gary Neville said he's innocent.
Well, he retweeted the former head of the CPS, said, well, look, if he's no charges, that means legally he's innocent. So he retweeted that, and lots of people are attacking him for basically saying, well, what about supporting women's rights? It's a very tricky, there have been no... that has been withdrawn because the witness withdrew their statement and they couldn't go forward with it. And so supposedly some new evidence came up as well. This has got nothing to do with these cases because it was more like it was coercive behaviour he was up for and various other things. But on a separate thing, I just want to say that 1.3% of recorded rapes have last year went to charge. So that's not even people who actually were convicted. So, I mean, essentially it's been decriminalised. That isn't the same as what this is, but I'm just saying that the CPS really all over the place when it comes to these issues.
The Times, Josh, and British Gas banned from force-fitting new meters.
Yeah, so this is actual journalism and actually making a positive impact on the world. The Times sent out its undercover journalists, found that this company was basically breaking into vulnerable people's houses to fit these meters. And I had a meter like this when I was at university, And it's a horrible thing. Like suddenly it just runs out in 2 a.m. or whatever, and you have to go down to the nearest petrol station if you've got enough cash on you or whatever.
So this is an old-fashioned money in the meter, the way that...
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it is. And the thing, normally, legally, they're not allowed to cut off people's power and electricity, except for when these meters are now fitted.
Right.
So because of this investigation, and some of the people, there was a mum whose daughter was disabled and had a hoist, which obviously was needed. They can't break into people's houses to legally, I guess, to fit this, but now it's been made legal, and that's a good thing. So
they were attempting a sort of regressive form of metering, which involved like the old-fashioned put 50p in the meter and you get your power back.
Essentially,
on, sort of
that's
thing,
it.
And they were right. Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, we've managed to blame it on a German though, which is good. We've got a German guy there because it was a German-run multinational.
Picture there towering over his wife. What about inflation? It's hit its peak, says Upbeat Bank.
Yeah, it's good. It's going down. I think it was 11% in October, then it was 10.5%. Now it's gone down a bit further. So by the end of the year, they're hoping it's back to about 4%. So obviously the window for teachers, train drivers, whoever, who are wanting above inflation pay rises of 11%, and so obviously that window is rapidly decreasing, because in 6 months' time, for them to say I want 11% pay rise, it's going to be like, whoa, wait a minute, inflation's actually now 5%.
And Nick, you have the Telegraph, very fetching picture of Rupert Everett there, but the lockdown damage to workforce is permanent, which is the main story.
I know, who'd have thought just turning the economy off, you can't just turn it back on again like Windows 95. Yeah, we've broken it, and in ways that we don't understand is basically what's happened. I was against lockdowns, but that's cold comfort, really, because the Bank of England is saying that we'll face permanent stagnation. The workforce will shrink permanently in the wake of the lockdown. And
that's because they're old, right? So they're Is that...
There's that as well.
Yeah.
There's part of it because we've got increased detachment from the workforce. There's people that left work and Jeremy Hunt desperately wants to get back into work, who retired early. We've got the baby boomers retiring anyway, naturally. And so they were talking about potential supply growth, which determines how much the economy can grow before it starts to overheat. They were saying it was going to be 2.5%. Now it's going to be 0.7% over the next couple of years. So we're facing permanent stagnation. Ian Duncan-Smith has said, I don't think the bank understands what's happening in the labour market. And I don't think anyone understands, because, as I kept saying at the time, this is unprecedented.
Yeah.
Maybe the virus was, but certainly the lockdown was unprecedented, and obviously a disaster.
And a lot of interacting forces, among them, some that I think are arguably not necessarily disastrous. If people are taking early retirement or deciding they don't want to go back to the full throttle work that they were committed to previously, that might be a rebalancing that is what, to be honest, people were anticipating 100 years ago when we had automation and technology to do the hard work for us. We were supposed to take it easy, and instead we've kind of kept pace with it.
But I think the idea is that they're taking more money out of the economy than putting into it, because they're not paying taxes anymore and they're getting their pensions.
Yeah.
So that is part of the issue, and this is...
They won't be able to get their pensions until they're 65, though. They can't just... they can take their pension from investments that they've made, but they're not getting state pension. I do think there might be an interesting opportunity here for them to say that there could be a kind of grey area when you're approaching retirement and maybe considering that maybe life, is worth living a little bit instead of having your foot to the pedal to the metal the whole time. There might be some tax breaks and so on for people in their 60s to encourage them to stay in the workforce rather than to, as you say, remove themselves entirely.
It seems like you thought about this more.
Well, it's multiple quite tempting to me to stay in for another 3 years.
But you're also coming after a lockdown where printing money and inflation. It's multiple factors at once, isn't it, which is the issue.
Absolutely. And I think also, you only have to walk around London to realise things have just not returned to normal by any means. Tubes are still empty. That seems to be a fairly strong signal to me. It's extraordinary. You get on the tube at Stockwell at 9:30, I had the carriage to myself. Bizarre.
I get all taxis now, but enjoy it.
That's the front pages. Coming up after the break, Australia risks the wrath of King Charles. Sturgeon struggles with her principles. Netflix is no longer in a sharing mood. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons? I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GBNews. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you.
GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
And welcome back to Headliners with Josh Howie and Nick Dixon. Friday's Telegraph now, and a story that has been not so much a slow-motion car wreck as the unravelling of a poorly knitted woolen garment snagged on a querulous thistle, Nick.
Nice. Yeah, this is Sturgeon gender policy in disarray after she refuses to say transgender rapist is female. So she got herself all confused, didn't she, about this Adam Graham guy with the face tattoo who then claimed to be a woman. And it's an absolute mess. The First Minister Sturgeon said that she doesn't have enough information to make a decision, despite agreeing that the double rapist was almost certainly only claiming to be transgender as an easy way out. I don't know what kind of information she wants. Does she want to have a full search? I'm not sure what it would involve. It's amazing how she's imploded over this. We had people saying she's on the verge of quitting. I wrote a piece for the Daily Skeptic saying, could this be the Berlin Wall moment for wokeness? Because you see how quickly it could all fall apart. Yeah. Because, this trans madness, everyone's seen it now. This Adam Graham case has been the flashpoint, and everyone's seen what nonsense it is and how dangerous it is.
I hope so. But, it was only a few months ago that Starmer was unable to define a woman on camera, and we all thought this must surely be the end, and we could see, the end of a promising political career if he doesn't wake up. But somehow they stumble over these gaps, and it is ridiculous. And on this very programme, we have one of the guests in your seat who was saying that this case was being weaponised, against people who were concerned about the trans issue. Who was that? He's weaponised, well, I won't say his name, but it was what they're saying essentially is that this does seem like an outlier. Yes, I admit it is an outlier, but the whole point is that we're anxious that people will cynically and opportunistically take advantage of this legislation, that outliers are going to be the problem.
Absolutely. I mean, she says she doesn't have enough information about whether she might. The thing is, feminists have been shouting from the rooftops for years this exact information, that how this would be abused if the system came into thing. So the fact that she's turning around going, I didn't have enough information, that's because you've had your fingers in your ears. Or even worse, you have heard it and you've cynically ignored it and calling them instead, racist and whatnot. And this is why the whole sort of Stonewall motto has been no debate. Because the moment it's opened up to any kind of investigation, like a journalist very simply asking, is this person a woman or not, it crumbles, like you say, but it just all falls apart.
And yet they give no ground. And it is the classic response, isn't it, that they haven't got the information. It's very similar to that woman who was being tested to see whether or not she was capable of being on the Supreme Court, I think, or something like that. It was going, I'm not capable of finding a woman. You know, it's like evasive all the time. But Sturgeon's response was, I'm not saying whether he's a man or a woman, or she's a man, or it's whether they're a man or a woman. They're a rapist.
Yeah.
Yeah, but for them they are a man, aren't they? Isn't that what, you know?
The flaw with the system, it's much like when Leo Kurtz was saying it should be whether you've made an effort. And I said, Leo, that can't work. We can't bring every trans person in front of you. No. And that's really what Sturgeon's saying. She's saying it's case by case, but that can't possibly work.
Yeah.
We kick off with business news. Sorry, we don't kick off. We've already been in this section with business news out from the Friday Times. This is the end of Australia's fealty to the Crown, Josh.
Seems like it. King Charles won't appear on Australia's new $5 note. So his mom was on it, and she's basically been on various notes throughout Australia's...
That's a picture of her I don't recognise from our notes. A slightly different portrait.
Yeah. Maybe that's... It's not
is that her squinting in the Australian...
It's not a very nice sort of drawing, is it? No.
It's the Queen if she's been in the sun too long in Australia.
Yeah. It sort of looks almost like she's Asian. Anyway, not that there's anything wrong with that. But, so now he's going to still be on the coins. Yeah. So they're giving him that. But they've got a Labour government who in Australia who are very much staunch Republicans. And this is the people criticising this move are saying that you're just doing this as a political thing. They're replacing it instead with, I think, Indigenous people and culture, which they have on a bunch of other notes. And it's a good excuse to be able to say, oh, no, we're going to put loads of Indigenous people. And it's just an excuse for them, essentially. But this is interesting because this is, I guess, the first sign of possible things to come.
It's incredibly patronising of them to put Indigenous people on their banknotes without having made any real effort to restore their wealth or their
Guys,
rights.
have the banknotes, have the $5 note. We're not going to give you $5.
I do remember that. I can't remember his name, but one of the Australian premiers about 20 years ago, he did say that, he didn't foresee Australia becoming a republic during the time of Elizabeth. But that was because Australians were Elizabethans rather than monarchists. Yeah. And, of course, Princess Diana had a famously successful tour there as well. I don't suppose it is a big surprise if they're grabbing this opportunity, Nick.
No, it's all falling apart, like you said, because of the death of our beloved Queen. It was always going to happen. And you've just got so many attacks on the monarchy at the same time. You've got Meghan and Harry. And so it's all going to fall apart. And we've got a sort of weaker monarch with Charles. He's a more sensitive kind of guy and all that. But I think it's a bit much Australia going, we're all so progressive and great. It's like, I mean, you basically turned into a penal colony during COVID. You had, like, weird camps and stuff. You went incredibly authoritarian. It's just a weird smiling face of authoritarianism.
It was not there shining out. I do remember, I thought I came up with this quote, but somebody told me it was Clive James. But the point about Australians is they're not descended from convicts. They're descended from prison governors.
Yeah, that was a good point.
And there's a little bit of truth to that. There is a tendency in there to regard it as a
very strict country in terms of drinking, about jaywalking, things like that. They're very tough on that
Absolutely
stuff.
right. But I will say, if I was an Australian, I would find it a bit odd that we had any kind of, that we were subjects of a crown.
It's odd anyway. The whole concept is odd. But
it is. But at least they're our family. With us, it's family. It might be odd, but, you kind of gather around the hearth, don't you, once a year. Anyway, over to Friday's Mirror. Things are changing at Netflix as well, Josh.
Oh, my God. This is going to cause a little bit of pain out there, particularly for me. Yeah. Netflix reveals how it will stop others using your account in tough new crackdown. Now, this has been coming for a while now. They've been losing subscribers. They've been not losing money, but not making the money they should have been. And so now, finally, they are going to start cracking down on all of this. They're going to still keep it. Basically, you're going to have to log in every couple of weeks or so to prove that you're still there. And they're also going to follow all the different devices. Yeah. So you're allowed some devices, but I think there are people who are taking the mickey.
Yeah. I don't have a problem with this. And I noticed the Mirror were kind of going, they're going to get tough and they're being brutal. I was like, the Mirror make their paper virtually unreadable online to prevent people from...
People should pay for their services.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I had a very different way of covering this, but I read just at the end, in December, the government's Intellectual Property Office deemed that password sharing is a criminal and civil offence. You could face prosecution, so then I changed everything I was going to write.
I don't know that there's any problem. There's 4 people in my family. We have a Netflix account and we share it between us. That's not a problem, is it? It's not like every one person has to have it.
But, if your friend who you once went on holiday with and you're still using their account 3 years later...
I don't see any problem with it at all. I think it's good. I think people should stop taking media for granted. Higher education news now in Friday's Telegraph. Less than a quarter of young people think university is worthwhile, Nick.
Yeah, it's restored my faith in young people. So a third of people think a university degree is a waste of time. Of course, they're slightly wrong. It's an expensive waste of time that brainwashes you into Marxist ideas. But, you know, obviously some degrees are important, like medicine and science, but I think they're on the right track. 58% say that it doesn't prepare students for the real world. That's definitely true. They polled 2,000 people. This was at Higher Education Policy Institute. 32% of 18 to 24-year-olds agree with the statement. University degree is a waste of time. 22% disagree.
Now, that's the bit I found interesting. 22% disagree. So that's actually a smaller number who are certain about it. About half, more than half perhaps, are expressing no opinion. But only a quarter actively said they thought it was worthwhile. I mean, that's a more stark figure to me, and probably reflects the number of people for whom it is worthwhile, roughly.
Yeah, they're so apathetic. I mean, somebody didn't even bother replying, probably. But yeah, I mean, what do you think? I mean, obviously a lot of courses now are just sort of, they're nonsense and they get you in debt. Obviously, some courses, technical things are still necessary, but and you can get it online, and they started doing online courses. People are saying we may as well go on YouTube, and I think there's a good case for that.
I think the interesting thing here is that of these 2,000 people, it doesn't say how many of them are actually in university.
Yeah.
So it's just like young people. I know a couple of people who've just sort of turned 18, 16. They left school at 16. They're all jobs. They just bought their first cars.
Yeah.
They're working. So it isn't... Of course, when you're in the middle
but
class...
it has become the default option for a huge swathe of Middle England who are not going to benefit from it. But it's become like a hygiene issue. It's not like kind of going, oh, I've got a degree. It's like having something flashy. It's more like if you don't have a degree, it's like you don't even know how to wipe your ass. You know, it's that kind of... It's a feeling like, oh, my person doesn't even have a degree.
Was that Heinz's hygiene factors? Yeah, it's not positive, but if you don't have it, it's a negative. Yeah. And then Blair was a lot of the blame for that with his 50% should go to university nonsense.
Completely agree. Over to the Independent now, Josh, for what looks to me like the most dangerous and easily repurposed and they wandered onto extraordinarily swampy ground here, but go on anyway.
They sure have. Let's see if we can dig ourselves out of this swamp, if at all possible, swim out. MRI scans reveal impact of racism and poverty on black children's brains. Now, let's not mix up science and race, which race is a spectrum energy, you know, all of this stuff. And essentially, toxic stress, and they're saying it's caused by racism and poverty, has an impact on black children's brains for their life. That's not really what this study is about. And this study is something that we've known for a long time, is that people's childhood, the way that their brain develops during their childhood will stick, those pathways will stay forever. And certainly people who've been through trauma, whether that's physical abuse, but also people who grew up in poverty, and the stress of that and nutrition, all of these have a massive impact. And the one big thing is attachment theory. So if you have like people who are orphans, people who grow up with just one parent or absent parents or narcissistic parents, all of this has an impact. So what they've done is made this kind of thing where, and this is a study in America, where they've kind of seen these differences of brains but in poverty, but really because of poverty. Yeah. And they've tried to make a causal link going, well,
they've mapped it onto
more of it because more black children in America live in poverty, then it's a racism issue.
Yeah, I think it's a very bad idea to start doing racial MRI scans. I have to say, it's virtually going back to calipers, isn't it?
Well, I was going to say, the Independent getting dangerously close to phrenology. Yeah. And it's a bizarre newspaper, and they get to the point at the end, they go, race is a social construct, and it's all about inequality. It's about the Independent trying to prove that everything on Earth is social inequality, and also to make everything about race now, which those are the two things the left like doing.
As we saw with the police brutality story yesterday. Anyway, that's enough for part two. Coming up, things get a little bit more fun. We have sensitivity readers for books, gatekeepers for gyms, chastity belts for profligate fathers. We'll see you in a couple of minutes. See you then. I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every weekend, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Bigger and better, starting at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday.
Can't be too safe. Bring it on. Has there ever been a more innuendo feature?
And Sundays, we're on at 9.
It's ridiculous.
Just get on with it. Maybe you should get a proper job.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners. Getting straight back into it, we have Nick now, taking us through some authorial news. A famous author is understandably peeved at the latest indignities.
Yes, Anthony Horowitz, hurt by cuts to book after sensitivity read. So he is the writer of the Alex Rider spy novels, and he deliberately put a Native American in there, just for, because it'll be interesting. But then, of course, people didn't like that, and he got in all sorts of trouble. And at one point, he said that the guy had a face that could have been carved out of wood, a mere sort of metaphor, but this was taken out because of the potential allusion to cigar store Indians. This is how ludicrous this is. He also, they wanted to replace scalpel with surgical instrument because they're claiming that it's linked to scalping, whereas, of course, he pointed out, actually scalpel comes from the Latin word meaning to cut, whereas the scalping comes from the Middle English word meaning the top of the head. So they're just basically, Simon, it's the latest in thick, ignorant, brainwashed fools ruining books.
He was actually just right off the bit and being sensitive to things that weren't problematic at all. In fact,
well, that's what they do, didn't they? Find problems where there aren't any.
He said that he had been told earlier he'd aroused some indignation because he just wanted to have a black character in his book, a major character, and he was told that this was dangerous cultural appropriation, that he shouldn't write about things he doesn't know about.
Then they started with a Native American, dipped his toe in. Then next time he'll go.
Well, but Ken Casey wrote the most famous Native American in fiction, probably the guy in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. There wasn't. I mean, I don't know that it was a particularly sympathetic or not sympathetic portrayal, but it certainly.
He came out well in the film.
Yeah,
well,
exactly.
All fiction. I mean, it's ridiculous, this idea. But I mean, the thing is, you say that they wanted him to do it. The point is, he did it. They suggested those changes. Yes. He made them. And this is the thing that he says at the end of it. Well, yeah, at the moment, it's really not worth challenging people because of the punitive response you might get. Well, I'm sorry, mate. You can talk about it, but that's cowardice. Like, you've given in there. Don't complain about it.
I literally wrote the word coward, so I totally agree with you. That's
do you think it is cowardice?
Oh, we wrote it bigger. So you've got to stand up to these things. That's it. We all have to do this.
Do you think so, really? Or do you
I genuinely think so. I think this is why exactly you're in the situation, because people haven't stood up and said...
No, but I would have to at least argue devil's advocate here that it is probably sensible to get the book published, not have a massive row with your publisher and your agent, and then afterwards say, incidentally, I don't know if you're aware of this, but authors are exposed to this kind of irritation now. It's fine. I'll take the world's scalpel out because it doesn't really matter. But honestly, do we really want to go down this path? That seems to me a fairly...
I think you just
now we're having the conversation, because if he just lost his agent and publisher over it, I mean, then
don't whine about it then. I don't think you get to have your cake and eat it on this. Don't then sort of complain about it when actually you didn't stand up against it.
He calls it death by 1,000 cuts, but it doesn't say if those cuts are with a scalpel or a surgical instrument.
Or possibly a cigar cutter. Josh, Daily Mail now. BBC Radio 2, it seems, are hemorrhaging listeners due to their policy of ageism, hiring 50-year-old scamps like Scott Mills to replace 89-year-old presenters.
So Radio 2 refugees have abandoned the BBC station for commercial alternatives.
Yeah.
Actually, all of the BBC output seems to have gone down. The radio output has gone down considerably and is moving over. And they've lost, 580,000 listeners during the year. And they've lost Ken Bruce, Steve Wright, Paul O'Grady. And that's...
Lost or sacked?
Well, some of them sacked, some of them kind of not shown the love.
OK.
And so, but definitely with an agenda to chase for the youth audience.
Yeah.
And this is the thing, is that, first of all, those 580,000 people were from last year. So the impact, what's going to be happening now, is going to be bigger than that.
Yeah.
And number two is, you never chase your audience. Like, don't chase youth. Let your youth get old.
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
But to be fair, it's going to happen every so often at Radio 2. I think Paul O'Grady went a little bit early, possibly, but I do think possibly Steve Wright had run his course. I mean, he'd had an extraordinarily long career in the very
21 years, I think, and now 31.
Massive. So this guy, Scott Mills, who I don't listen to, he's been on Radio 1, but he's been very popular there. He is now 50 years old. That's surely old enough to be able to be trusted with Radio 2, isn't it? There'll be a little bit of a bump, and then... Well, are we not failing to recognise that this... I mean, I do understand Radio 2 is for the mature listener. They like to hear classic pop from the 60s and 70s, but it's not like they're bringing in gobby 16-year-olds or something to do...
Well, Paul O'Grady left because he had to work with Rob Beckett. I didn't think Rob was that bad. I've met him. He seems all right. But
Rob's 37.
Well, yeah, what I love is this Boom Radio, though, Simon, where you have to be born between 1946 and 1964. I've checked your birthday, you just miss out.
But
it's pretty cool. It's for boomers, it's called Boom Radio. But the great thing about this is it's all just great for GB, because the more people that stop listening to radio...
increasing radio station.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful. We do need some more music on the channel. Gym news now in The Guardian, Nick, and yet again, women are not being noticed the correct amount.
Yes, watch this creep. The women exposing gym harassment on TikTok. It's strange this has come out now. Well, not strange. It's partly why it's come out now. We had that video the other day, went viral, where the woman was claiming, oh, this man's staring at me, whereas really he just seemed to be glancing briefly, seeing, what's that woman doing? Oh, she's filming herself.
This is how to not approach girls at the gym.
Loudly intruding like a man in a gym.
Is she in a gym?
So she was saying that this guy is like creeping on her. But if you look at it, he's just in the background sort of minding his own business.
Yeah.
And he's not
flexing his muscles.
He's not doing that much. If you're filming and you're dressed like she's, he's probably looking at what's going on over there. Oh, it's a woman filming.
Isn't it a lot creepier that she's filming him without him knowing? That feels to me wrong.
But now it's illegal to be a man in a gym. Let's just go back to totally separate spaces again. You were saying before the show, Josh.
If only we knew how to define a man and a woman to be able to do that. The examples that are given in these different clips are somewhat ridiculous. Like literally, and anybody who goes to the gym, Nick and I, we work out regularly together, so we know what's what.
Yeah.
But you're resting between reps and you're looking around.
Yeah.
And also you're seeing, as this person finishing with that equipment, it isn't like... Now, that's not to say that there isn't sexual harassment within gyms. I think there probably is quite a lot of it. But the exampple that are given here, or certainly that I've seen, are somewhat ridiculous.
It's difficult, isn't it? I also go to the gym. It is difficult if you're surrounded by some bodies, that are like a lot of flesh. Some bodies are in good shape, some bodies are in bad shape. You just naturally glance around. You try and limit the staring, the kind of maintaining. But I think a lot of blokes check out other blokes in gyms as well. And not in a sexual way, but just like kind of, where's my
fantastic glutes.
Yeah. There was I saw a video today of a lady doing a squat with a heavy bar, then she got stuck at the bottom. Yeah. And you're thinking that's when you need a man to come and help you out.
And did someone help her out?
In the end, actually, a woman helped her out. But you wait a long time.
A lot of guys are probably afraid that they'll get...
Exactly.
So that's when ladies, see. But Josh, fecundity news now, and at least one Ugandan man is swimming against the depopulation trends that are so alarming.
Man with 102 children says enough is enough.
Wow.
What a wimp.
102.
Why stop at 102? This is that's pathetic.
How many mothers has he distributed that load among?
12, I think. So,
he's a times
Uganda
table
villager,
virtually.
yeah, exactly. Musa Hasaya Casera. He's got 102 children, 578 grandchildren. He cannot even remember all of his children's names, let alone grandchildren. A lot of them all sort of live together on this kind of farm. So he's got like 20 thatched mud huts, which I'm quite jealous of, because at least that means he's got a garden.
Yeah.
But he had a successful cattle business, and it seems like, and butchers, and then that's kind of been affected. So some of the mums are leaving him recently.
Right.
And he's saying to them, look, you guys need to go on contraception because it's too... I can't feed my kids anymore.
Do we have any idea how old he is? I can't...
68.
Wow, and he's still capable of fathering them. That is remarkable.
My favourite quote is, how can a man be satisfied with one woman? That is a sign of being born a man, but with female hormones. He's a sort of Ugandan top G. He wants, multiple women. And he's got this very complicated system because he needs the mothers to identify the children, but then he asks his son to identify some of the wives because he's forgotten who they are as well.
I like that. How can a sign of a woman is, a man with female hormones. Yeah,
we have another story which is concerned with inadequate parenting on the other end. Friday's Mirror, and in loco parentis, Alexa has her limits.
Yeah, this is dad loses custody of daughter 5 after leaving Alexa to babysit after he went to the pub. So the funny thing about this, the bizarre thing about this story is halfway down, it suddenly says, he was discovered to have been using a virtual assistant after being arrested by police for strangling his partner at the end of their drinking session. And that's like paragraph 6 or something.
Talk about burying the lead.
Yeah, exactly. So they went to a number of pubs. She can't remember anything until he was strangling her, which I'm not making light of, but I'm just making light of the fact that they put that so low. And
So the moral is, if you're using an electronic babysitter, don't strangle your girlfriend
just before.
It will attract attention.
And it says at the end here, there was some effort by him to keep an eye on her, but he knows the standards fell below what is expected of a parent. So he does have some self-awareness, Simon.
There's possibilities. Anyway, that's part 3 over, I'm afraid. The other bad news is there's a part 4 coming up. We've got Nick going to grapple with Satanists. Josh will be testing the virtues of a testicular battery. My goodness, I will be sitting here wincing. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m, join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us
Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners. Lots of good stories to cram into the last few minutes. Nick, religious news now in the Daily Mail. A few years ago it was Jedis. We now have a new alternative to the tired old churches, mosques and synagogues.
Yes, it's Satanists. So the Global Order of Satan UK claims to have seen huge rise in membership, and for some reason the Suffolk town of Bungay has become a hub for Satan worshippers.
Bungay?
Yeah, and it's all to do, of course, with the decline of Christianity, the woke Church of England and Sam Smith's music videos, but also they actually kind of admit that they're sort of progressives. They say the Global Order of Satan insists that it's a progressive, independent, non-theistic satanic ministry. But listen to what they say here. They talk about the decline in dogmatic religions and a movement towards self-identification and self-realization. So they're admitting that identity politics is essentially Satanism. Their words, not mine.
Well, no, it is. It absolutely is. The idea that you can create your own identity is the fundamental heresy, isn't it?
Yes, and it goes back to people like Aleister Crowley, who said, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." It's do anything you want, you identify how you want, and you don't care about society. And yeah, and it's not that surprising, is it, in the culture we're in?
I find it quite interesting because, as I think they pointed out, or in the story, you know, even Milton in Paradise Lost had a grudging respect for Satan for standing up to the sort of default worship and obedience and so on in heaven, that he made Satan the more interesting character, and it's kind of left open who you should side with. I have also, incidentally, encountered, I think they're called the Church of Satan. There might be different like branches. I think they were set up in Los Angeles in the 60s or something. It was quite good. Their manifesto was quite strong. It was like self-reliance as much as self-identification.
Yeah, they have a good patter. I mean, it's like Scientology. I mean, they use that as the kind of, they quote Milton, and that's the kind of legitimate face of it. But then you find out there's a load of cats being hung and stuff. So
what do you think, Josh?
Yeah, I mean, it's just funny they're saying there's no devil. And like you say, that it's all like very
it's rationalist,
but that's what that is what the devil would say.
Yes, that's
surely.
true.
And also, when they say here, they said, but they choose it because he was the first to speak out and rational inquiry and whatnot. And none of that other stuff in the Bible. It's like I don't know much about the New Testament, but I'm sure the devil's not a good guy.
Well, the devil, I mean, he does crop up. Of course, he shows Christ the temptations and so on. But the devil emerged a lot more through like Thomas Aquinas and St. Augustine and so on, and then Dante and the Inferno and all that sort of thing. He's kind of emerged much more vividly through post-Christian.
So you think they're old school Christians?
I think he's there in artificial intelligence. I think it's absolutely full of demons. I don't think it's any coincidence it's coming back in the face of that. I think that's unleashing demons. And then obviously the particle accelerator in the CERN, of course, as we know, also opened up other dimensions.
These guys have been killing some cats.
I am surprised at the choice of Bungay, though, I have to say. Back to The Independent, Josh. You really seem to be on a roll when it comes to sharing spurious research at the moment.
Oh, indeed. How long do people wait before bailing on a bad date? Less than an hour. Apparently, this is a classic article of essentially a press release from Britannia Rescue teaming up with Denise Van Outen to launch a dateside rescue hotline. But essentially, people take 25 minutes to discern that this date isn't going well, and then they'll stick it out for a little bit longer, mostly through politeness.
Yeah, so half an hour, 25 minutes, it's gone badly, and then another half an hour just to find a polite exit.
And then it usually takes me like 2 months to break up with them.
Listen, I went to university in 1983. I knew before the end of the first term I wasn't cut out for that course, and I did 3 years.
Yeah, I mean...
just knowing.
And now you got married.
Yeah, I know, it's like I just have no means of escape.
I went on a date where I wanted to leave within minutes, not 25 minutes, more like 3 or 4. But I thought you can't really run out, because if you're a public figure, you're quite easy to just find online. So you know what I mean? It's quite hard to just hide.
She was paying for your dinner, right?
Yeah, there's that aspect.
Your shoulders, Nick.
But they talk about all different excuses people use, and there's broken down cars or getting stuck in traffic. That's hard to use once you're there on the day. Those are pre-date, just for the viewer. So
I will say, it is a superpower to be able to extricate yourself from situations you're no longer happier in. It is everything from a date to a bad marriage. I think it is. It's a significant way of elevating your chances of happiness. Is learning how to say, do you know what, this isn't working for me in a way that isn't going to annoy people.
But it's not really our strength as a nation, is it?
It is not, and certainly not as a sex. Stripper news now, Josh. From where else? The Daily Star. a surprisingly profitable fetish that you would think could be satisfied within even the most stale of marriages, to be honest.
Indeed. Stripper bought house with £130,000 earning from one night of kicking man's testicles.
Testicles.
So this is even more money than Shell makes in profit. That's it.
Certainly more than their tax bill.
She was on a podcast. So I guess there's a podcast for sort of porn people and strippers or whatever. There's this podcast, it's called Pillow Talk.
You've never heard of it? You're like, I guess there is.
I've never, you guys, Pillow Talk, yeah, regular listener, like it. And she was basically, she revealed that this was the most amount of money she'd made in one day.
Yeah.
Some guy just wanted her to just kick away.
I can't imagine how they bargained for that, how he negotiated, though. What did she say how much would you charge?
110,000!
Extraordinary.
Yeah.
I mean, you would normally think the market would have set the price a little lower than that. There would have been a woman, you know...
I would have done it.
Yeah, exactly.
And why did she buy a house in the Philippines? You could get a house in Middlesbrough or something for 130 grand. And also, people, I mean, I'm not into this stuff, by the way. Fool me once. But, the fact that people say, people are like losers who are into this. He had 130 grand to spare.
Yeah.
This guy's a player.
He's obviously knows, Well, maybe that was why he was wanting to be kicked, brought down a peg or two. Anyway, we move on to science news now and genetic mutants in the Daily Star. It sounds like a recipe for fish that bite your own fingers.
Yeah, scientists splice alligator DNA into fish to make super mutant creatures. What could possibly go wrong? And they want to make a more reliable food source. They'll have a longer lifespan. They'll be more resistant to certain bacteria.
So to be clear, this is the fish is like the basic model, and it's got a bit of alligator DNA, not the other way around.
Correct.
Alligators with fish. Yeah,
and it's to do with the antibiotic-resistant bacteria. There's naturally this antimicrobial protein. Anyway, it's very complicated, Simon. But they live longer and they're not as susceptible to illness.
Is it because they're cramming too many fish?
It is. They're cramming too many together. And now what they messed up here is they've said that they've made sure they can't reproduce. But I immediately wrote, life finds a way. The next paragraph, it said, life finds a way. So, it's dangerous.
And the other quote from Jurassic Park, what was it? Your scientists were so busy working out what they could do, they didn't stop to wonder whether they should.
Absolutely. Yes. Because if they can reproduce, then if they got into the actual general population, they would just and also they would have this natural advantage.
I mean, this is what I'm talking about with demons and devils in art. I think the extent to which we are toying with nature at the moment, it's beyond the wildest dreams of Faust.
So you think the Satanists would be up for this kind of stuff?
I assume they would, yes. Well, I mean, possibly not on rational grounds, but they're certainly not being held by some sense that God designed the perfect universe and you shouldn't try and get an alligator and a cat.
So they think, why not? Why not do it? They think. Wrongly.
Should we finish up with football news? Josh, this is presumably some sort of glitch that you've been given this instead of Nick, but it turns out video gaming experience can translate into the real world.
Well, that's it. I didn't know much about football, but I do know a little bit about video games. Club fined £22,000 per match for this manager who's in charge after he learned the trade on Football Manager. Now, Nick has informed me that this actually is a slight misnomer because he actually did a fair bit of training. But I do like this idea that this kind of those hours seemingly wasted as a teenager can actually come back and make you profit. Supposedly he's good. Supposedly since he's joined this team that's in France, they've won nearly, apart from one, every single game. So they're happy to take that fine, I guess, until he gets his UEFA Pro license.
That's not even like the weekly wage bill for a mid-level striker, is it? £22,000 a week? I wouldn't think.
No, you're right. Yeah. I've got a similar arrangement with GBNews. They get fined heavily for the things I say, but I'm so good. They've just kept me on.
It's fantastic. I love it. Stade de Reims, I think that's how it's pronounced. They have a lovely cathedral there. I mean, I suppose it depends which video game you play, right? There are probably some which aren't so immediately...
Well, I played TV Pundit when I was a teenager, and it's been a
My son plays Assassin's Creed. I actually got him into it deliberately. I found an art book of theirs in Waterstones, and it was just beautiful graphic art, and I got him into it, and he's learned loads of interesting stuff about ancient Greece and Rome and...
I thought you meant because you were hoping he'd become an assassin.
No, I do want him to become an assassin, but at the moment he still thinks it's very much an art trip. Well, anyway, that's all for tonight's show. Let's take another quick look at Friday's front pages before we go. The Daily Mail. People don't simply vanish into thin air. The Telegraph have lockdown damage to workforce is permanent. You only had to watch tonight's show to get a sense of how real that is. Guardian calls for tougher windfall tax after Shell posts obscene record profits and a picture of Zelensky being teased with the possibility of EU membership, which is then snatched away from him. The Mirror lead with the Mason Greenwood charges of sexual assault have been dropped. And finally, the Times, British Gas banned from force-fitting new meters, and the photograph there is of a couple who have benefited from the previous rather unpleasant regime that they had in place. Those were your front pages. That is all we have time for. Thank you very much to my guests. Remember that headliners, and if you're watching the 5 a.m. repeat, stay tuned for Breakfast Show just after the break. I have been Simon Evans. I've been joined by Josh and Nick. Tomorrow night, I think Andrew Dawes in the hot seat. You'll have to join in to find out who wins. Good night.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio
With the GB News app.